So today I'm going to be diagnosing and fixing a charging issue with my Suzuki Intruder 800. Mine is a 95 model, but this should work for any model years of the 800. And if it is any different, it's going to be very minor. You're going to need just a few tools right here to get the seat and the side covers off. So that's what you'll need: the screwdriver and a 10mm wrench or ratchet. And then you're going to need a multimeter, which can measure voltage and ohms. So first, we're going to start with measuring the voltage right here with the bike on to make sure that it's a charging problem. And what we're going to do is you'll have the bike on and running, and you're going to keep it at about 3000 RPM. Measure across these two terminals for a DC voltage, and we're looking for around 13 to 14 volts, and that's if it is charging correctly. My bike is a little loud, so I'll have to just do it and we can talk about the results that I get afterwards, and I'll go ahead and do that right now. Alright, so after that, now I know that my bike is not charging correctly, because once I hold the meter on these two terminals right here, it's staying at 12.2 volts. And like I said earlier, we were looking for around 13 or 14 volts for correctly charging. So now we know that the charging isn't working. And now we have to figure out if the problem is the stator windings in here, or if the rectifier isn't correctly working to give us a 14 volt DC output. So first we're going to start with checking the stator, and to do that you're going to trace up from your rectifier the wiring harness all the way up to here, and you see you have these 3 yellow wires and this other connector right here. Alright, so now that I have these wires disconnected, we need to make sure that we're looking at the wires that come from the stator, because we're going to be measuring the voltage coming from the stator and going to the rectifier. So you need to make sure you're not trying to measure voltage from the rectifier, because you'll get nothing. In your bike, these are probably also going to be yellow wires right here. But the previous owner of this bike, he had, I guess, something go wrong with them and he had to replace them. And that's why these connectors are also different looking. So this might look a little different than yours will, but it should be about the same. So what we're going to do to check and see if the stator windings are okay is we're going to measure the resistance between all of these. And if we have a abnormally high resistance between any of the two wires, that means that we have a break somewhere in the circuit and you'll have to replace the stator. We're going to want to take our multimeter to measure ohms, and I'm going to turn off the continuity beeper. And now we can go ahead and check the resistance between each of these windings. Alright, so between the first two, I'm getting really close to 0, which is good. And between the next two, I'm getting really close to 0, which is also good. And the last pair, I'm getting 0 again, so that means our windings are good. Now that the continuity has checked out for each of these winding pairs, we need to make sure that it's producing voltage correctly. So the next part of making sure our stator is okay is going to be turning the bike on and holding it at about 3000 RPM. And we're going to be looking for about 50 to 60 volts between any of these two wire pairs. And that's going to be AC voltage. If you have your multimeter on DC, you will not get the correct readings, and might mess up your diagnosis. When I just tested it, between any two of these, I was getting around 56 volts, which shows that the windings are absolutely okay, so we're not going to have to replace the stator. Since the coils are okay, our next place to look for a problem is our regulator and rectifier, which we're going to look at this connector right here. And we're gonna measure the resistances between some of these wires, which is in the service manual for this bike. And I'll put up a picture of the one for the 95 model. And I'm pretty sure on some of the models they have a different rectifier, so you may have to find the chart for that in the owner's manual for those. I'm gonna reference that picture real quick and go ahead and get this disconnected and start measuring the resistance between them. Okay, so several of the resistance values that I got between some of these wires did not match what was supposed to be in the manual. So now we know that this rectifier is not good, and I have a new one right here. I'm gonna go ahead and check the values on these as well to make sure that this one is good and ready to go in my bike. Okay, so the resistance values that I got from my new regulator matched way better on the table. So now, just to make double sure, in case I got any of the measurements wrong, I'm gonna go ahead and plug it up without actually putting it into the bike yet, and make sure that this voltage right here is coming up to 14 volts DC like it should. To get where I can connect the new regulator to these wires right here without having to cut anything on the wires on my bike or for the new rectifier, I'm going to make a few little jumpers to go between these, from these banana style plugs to these blade connections right here. So I'll be right back when I get that done. Alright, so I got these little jumpers made and plugged in. Got the new rectifier right here. So now we're going to do the same thing as our first test. So I'm going to turn the bike on and measure the voltage right across these two terminals here to see if it's 14 volts at 3000 RPM. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, so with the new regulator rectifier right here plugged in, even at idle, I am getting around 13 volts, and then at 3000 RPM, I'm getting 13.7, which is a whole lot better than what I was getting with the old rectifier plugged in, which was around 12 volts, both at idle and at 3000 RPM. So now I can go ahead and install this new regulator rectifier into my bike now that I know that it will work. To get the old rectifier out, you just need to take these two little bolts down here out, and they are both 10 millimeter. Okay, so it's beginning to prove to be really difficult to get this little plug right past back here on my bike, down through there. It keeps catching right in here on my battery box. So to make it a little easier, I'm going to take these wires out of this plug. To do that, you just take something small and pretty flat, and these little notches right here in the plugs, you'll just stick the tool right in there, and then the wires will come straight out the back. Now I got all the wires out of this little plug, so now I can go ahead and finish taking the regulator out. And now we got to do the same thing to be able to get this one back through here. And this time you want to make sure you take note of how these are in the plug, so that whenever we get it fished back through, we can put them in the right spot so that our regulator will work like it should. Alright, so now I've got all the wires for the new regulator fished back through, and I'm going to put the wires that we took out of that connector, I'm going to put them back into the new connector. Now that I've got the wires put back into the plug, we can go ahead and mount our regulator down here to its little bracket. And I do recommend putting some Loctite onto these bolts, because every once in a while I'll check these bolts down here and they'll be backing out, and you really don't want these falling out while you're driving down the road, so it's better to be safe than sorry and put some Loctite on them. One last thing for mounting this, you want to make sure that the wires back here are in that little notch that is in the body for the regulator, and that you're not pinching them off while you're screwing it onto the bracket. So now we have the new rectifier mounted up on its bracket, and we have it plugged back in. So now, before we put the seat and everything back on, we're going to want to go ahead and check the voltage right across this just one last time. We're looking for 14 volts at about 3,000 RPM. And if that's all good, we can go ahead and put it all back together, and we're done with fixing our charging problem. Here we are with the bike back together. If y'all found this video helpful, it would help me out a lot if you would like and subscribe. If you have any questions about anything in this video, just leave it down in the comments and I'll try to help you out.